This is another chapter in the Bay Area Radio Museum's Living History series. I'm Rosie Allen. Mickey Luckoff is one of the most successful radio station managers in the history of broadcasting. He took two stations, KGO AM 810 and 560 KSFO, and turned them into ratings leaders in the Bay Area and nationally. During his more than 30 years as president and general manager, he cemented his legacy as a visionary in the news and talk format. First of all, Mickey, thank you and welcome. So happy that you joined us for this series because you are such an iconic member of the broadcasting community, and I thought, what a great time to talk to somebody that I actually know.
Thank you, Rosie. It's a pleasure to be here.
You hired me in this business. The first time, I don't even know when it was, but I think it was like 83 or 84 full time. Before that, I was at the FM station, so we ran into each other at those wonderful meetings in the community.
That's right.
So I want to start at the beginning because I'm not certain that a lot of people know that you are from Michigan.
That's right.
And you ended up in the Bay Area. How did you start out in this business?
I started out doing summer between my junior and senior year in college at a radio station in Detroit. They asked me to stay there full time. I said, no, I got to finish Michigan, which I did. And then I went to work for them in the summer of 58. And stayed there for 6 years. It was a pathetic little radio station whose signal only covered half the town. And a woman with McCann Erickson, a shriveled up little lady who was usually having a hangover, took a liking to me. And she said, you should really be in national sales. And I said, that sounds interesting. And she arranged an appointment for me to go to Metro Media, which I did. And soon after I got there, the manager left. They brought in a new manager, and he didn't like me. So he said goodbye to me, and I called the president of the company, and I said, I thought I was doing pretty well. And he said, I didn't know what happened, Mickey. He said, you'll be with Metro Media, but in Chicago. I never thought I'd ever leave Michigan, but Chicago worked out very well for me. I was I was in that office, the rep office, for 5 years. They asked me to run it, and I said, no, I want to go to San Francisco. So they came up with...
So what, you just decided that you wanted to go to San Francisco, or
Yes,
what was there about the call of the
well,
city?
Well, all my friends in Michigan were doctors, or became doctors. And almost all of them came to the Bay Area. And they said, you got to see this place. So I came out, I saw it, and I said, you're right, I have to be there. So I told Metro Media that, and they said, well, we have an opening that we want you to fulfill in Los Angeles. I said, I really didn't want to go to Los Angeles. Mickey, Los Angeles is a lot closer to San Francisco than Chicago is. So I did go to Los Angeles. I stayed there for 2 years. It was a station that never really took off, and so one day I went over to the ABC station, KABC, and I told them what I wanted to do, and they said, there's an opening at KGO. Would you be interested? I said, would I be interested? And as a matter of fact, I told my kids at the time, I said, if I get this job, I'll jump in the chocolate vat at Ghirardelli Square, which I never did.
I bet you didn't.
And they still hold me to it. Anyhow, I came to KGO, and I didn't really have a job description. I was just at KGO, and so I just bided my time.
But you came without a job or a real occupation. Were you in sales? Were you in management? What?
I think I was in sales.
But you're
and
not
so
sure.
I sort of took over the role of national sales manager.
Okay.
Because they didn't have one at the time, and it was an area that I had excelled in. And so I took that on, and the manager and the sales manager, general sales manager, weren't there very often. And so I found a lot of gaps to fill. And so I made my way into becoming the general sales manager. And it was just a few months after that, they promoted him to be manager. And then he went to New York, and I became general manager of the station after 2.5 years.
So it was just like a little fluke that you became general manager at KGO?
I call it damn lucky.
I call it damn lucky too.
Yeah, I
from
really,
my point of view.
it was very fortunate for me that it worked out the way it did. But I got some good breaks, and I've never forgotten it, and I'm very appreciative for it to happen.
And you got to, I guess, you came to the Bay Area in 1972.
That's right.
And then you started as GM on KGO in 75.
That's right.
So, what was the format like then?
It was
I know
it
it's
was the
different.
first news talk station. It really was. I mean, I didn't create the format. KABC, our sister station in Los Angeles, was all talk, and I just didn't like the sound of the word all talk. To me, that was a boring label.
Mm-hmm.
But we did news talk. But we, shall we say, upgraded the talent, and we put tremendous stress on the news. And the company always questioned, why do you put so much stress on news? And expense, I might add, Rosie. Because KCBS was a very good all-news radio station. I said, we're a different kind of news. We come out of the talk shows and talk about the news, the most important topics of the day. And it worked very well. And we hired people who were very astute at interpreting the news. And the talent had to be capable of being informative and entertaining, both. A dual concept, which made it very difficult to fill. A lot of people feel they can do talk shows, and a lot of people can do talk shows. But can they entertain, and can they inform? And then we branched out a little bit, Rosie, with specialty shows. We got Deanie Dell, which was a fabulous story all by itself, and eventually we got Len Tillum, the lawyer.
Yeah,
and
he was
both
great.
of them very entertaining. Midday transitioned us from hard news talk in the morning to more hard news talk for the rest of the day, and worked out very well.
And you also had some, I called it psych talk. Dr. Was it the woman who was on and I think she was syndicated at some point. She was very good, and I liked her, but she didn't last very long in that format.
She had a problem with the program director.
Oh, is that right?
I'm going to leave it right there.
Okay, so we're not mentioning names. Okay, that's why I thought I'd just pass on the name, because that person is still around doing what she was doing then in another location. So yeah, okay. Now you are certainly a pioneer in the talk radio format, even though you say you didn't start it. What gave you the idea of using news as part of the catalyst for the talk portion?
Well, as I said, the format was in place when I got there. I can't take credit for that, Rosie, but we emphasized the fact that the talk shows, and that's what all our promotion publicity was. First, we give you the news, and then we talk about it. Mm-hmm. So people would hang on after the morning show. Actually, some of our talk shows got better ratings than the news that preceded it. Mm-hmm. Although we had some very good news people, yourself included, and so the stories they heard became the issues that they talked about.
A short list of people that you hired: Dunbar, Wygant, Baxter and Allen, Jim Eason, Dr. Deanie Dell, as you mentioned, Ron Owens, Ray Taliaferro, Gene Burns, Owen Spann. Owen Spann, was he there when you got?
Yes,
he arrived
he
at
was.
KGO.
Quick story about Owen Spann. I used to try and play tennis at noon, and Owen was he's a very good talk show host.
He was. He was great.
It was fabulous interviewer. But Owen was black and white, and I realized Owen's contract was almost up, and I was playing tennis one day at the San Francisco Tennis Club, and I got a call on the tennis court. Owen has packed his goods and he's leaving the radio station. That was the end of that tennis game. But I hustled back and made sure that, Owen, we love you and we want you to continue. And there was no problem. But I was scared that.
Was that a contract negotiation, Mickey?
It wasn't even a negotiation. I just wasn't that attentive to the expiration date. That never happened again.
I know one of the things that you didn't like very much is negotiating contracts with talent.
Well, first of all, I thought that was something that the program director should do, and in some cases the news director. But for whatever reason, it usually fell to me. And
It's because you had the money, Mickey.
well, I had the company's money, but it worked out. I mean, there were some very interesting experiences with the talent. Some of them were very, very easy. Some of them were impossible.
Yeah.
But I don't think we ever lost anyone.
I think yes, you did. You lost one because that's how I got hired.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right. You want me to tell that story?
Sure.
Okay, that was Jan
Yeah.
Black. She was our first. She was the first woman radio anchor in the Bay Area, and she and Ron Owens became a couple, and Ron became her agent. And so Ron told her, "You got to go in and double your salary." She was making a pretty good salary.
Yes, she was.
And so we went back and forth, and I finally said to her, "Jan, I'm about to leave on a vacation. Your contract expires while I'm gone." I said, "I'm not going to double your salary, but here is my offer. And if you want it, great. If not, I have to say goodbye." And because of Ron's expertise, she left, and she was off the air for a long time.
Yeah, I remember.
And eventually went to KQED, and then finally KCBS. But yeah, you're right. That's
One of the reason I remember that is because Bruce Kamen, whom I loved. Bruce Kamen was our news director.
Fabulous.
He was an amazing human being. And
Fabulous.
I loved him, and I was so happy to work with you guys at that point. And he called me up on a Friday and said, in his gruff voice, "You want to start working on Monday?" Well, sure. I mean, I thought he was calling me to just fill in as I normally would. And he said, "No, I want you to come in tomorrow," which was Saturday, to talk about a contract. So that's how I got hired.
and believe me, we had discussed it before he called you.
I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did.
But that worked out well for both of us.
It was a gift. It really was, because I was not working full time then, because KSFX had been sold, and KGO AM was gone again. And which reminds me, we need to talk about KGO AM. When KSFX it transitioned, Disney owned ABC, and KSFX was part of ABC, as was KGO FM. When the station was it sold as KGO FM? Or
when Disney came in, well, remember,
Yeah.
Cap Cities succeeded ABC.
That's true. That's
and it
true.
was
I forgot about
KGO
that.
AM and FM.
AM and FM. Right.
And then Disney bought it. It was still KGO AM and FM. And those were all very, very good companies to work with. I mean, it was a constant struggle because we were the most expensive radio station that ABC had, mainly because of the news department. But
But we earned the money back. I mean, big time.
Absolutely, it was a great showcase for us. And I'll tell you a quick story. I got a call. The next company that owned KGO, which will remain nameless, purposely, they came from a company that worked with KCBS, and they said, "You always beat us. You always beat us. What is it?" And I said, "Well, I'm not sure I want to tell you."
Well, that's a secret.
But yeah, he was very much opposed to the money we were spending on news, and it became an intolerable situation.
Yeah. And that's the story that we'll talk about a little bit later on, when you finally left the business. But I also want to talk with you about why in the world would Disney sell KGO?
Well, Disney had a vice president, whose name I'm not going to recall right this moment, who convinced them to get out of the radio business. It was long before radio was suffering in any way. He may have been astute in having recognized that deregulation was going to be a damaging factor. I have to give him credit for that. Tom Skaggs was his name, Tom Skaggs. And he convinced them to sell it. And I had a relationship with Bob Iger, who still chairman of the board of Disney. Mm-hmm. And every time I saw him, I'd say, "Bob, why did you sell it to those people? And he was always apologetic. He says, Mickey, I'm sorry it went that way, but it was very unfortunate.
It was not a good group. It wasn't a good group for what we did. It wasn't a good group for the radio industry
Not at
as
all.
a whole. So I can see why it would be a thorn in your side because you cared so much about the business.
Yeah, well, I cared about the business, and I always told the employees, because I was getting up in age at that time. What does that say about now?
Now, right?
I was getting up in age, and I always told the employees, I'll stay here as long as they don't fool with the format.
You did say that.
And as soon as they did, I said, I promised you I'd stay as long as they didn't. And now they are, and I have to say goodbye.
Over the years, I know factually that you took a lot of heat from every corporation that was that owned us as a station. What was that? What did that feel like for you? Because you're the guy in charge, and you have to take a lot of heat about the amount of money you pay in salaries. You have to justify that by having good ratings, the best ratings from local to national. How did that feel? What was that like?
First of all, I like a good fight. I like a
Good.
good challenge.
I'm glad because we needed it.
And I love the format, and I wanted to protect the format at all costs. And I always told the company, if we can get the ratings in a market this size, the revenue will follow. And it did. Mm-hmm. And that's primarily the way it happened. It was a constant struggle with the companies. They were always after our budget. They always wanted to cut. And there were a number of times I used to say, no, I won't do this. I won't cut this. I won't cut the helicopter out. I won't cut the weather person or the sports person out. It isn't going to happen while I'm here.
And those things were important to the format because they added to the format.
Absolutely.
Did you have any idea that the personalities would become so popular in this business?
We hired them because of who they were.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, I remember at some point I couldn't go any place and talk because everybody would say, "Oh, we recognize your voice. You sound like somebody." We were everywhere. We were all over the Bay Area, and everybody knew all of the personalities. We were clearly the #1 station in the market and nationally, from what I understand, in ratings wise.
Billing wise.
And billing wise is even better. We like that part better. But the one other thing that you did that I think was so significant was the fact that you used KGO to collect millions of dollars for charities. And that was such a especially significant thing to do because not a lot of stations were doing that. And particularly the Leukemia Curathon that we did every year for more than 20 years.
Right.
And raised millions of dollars. What brought that on? What started that in the beginning?
There was a small group of stations throughout the country. They're the leaders in their market. WMAL in Washington, I think it was WOR in New York, KMPC in Los Angeles, and they were they were the cluster of the Leukemia Society, and they all did these radiothons. So always searching to be the best that we could possibly be. I said, well, I want to be one of those. And they came and they interviewed us, and they gave it the first year to the all news station, and it flopped miserably. And I had told them, I said, that's not the right format. It's nothing against the station. It's just not the right format for this. Mm-hmm. I said, we'll do it 24 hours a day. And so it failed over there, and they couldn't get to us fast enough. And we became one of those elite station group around the country, and we outraised them all.
No doubt.
And it was a tough piece of work.
But it was such a production.
That's what I mean.
It was a production, and I remember, well, from the beginning until the last Curathon, it was always something that even the talent wanted to do. We liked the production.
And if you recall, Rosie, we had the news anchors from all the television stations, mm-hmm. and the leading talent from all the other radio stations. And I remember some of the radio stations saying, we're not going to go on KGO,
Sure.
and others couldn't get there fast enough.
Of course.
And eventually, all of them wanted to be on it. Then management changed, and some of them pulled their talent back.
But it was a good place to be, because not only could they mention that they were going to be on KGO, that they pulled people for their shows on their stations, and I
Right.
think that was a good payback.
Right.
For
When
what they were doing.
the question you first asked me that we were everywhere, we went after everything we could get. We did street fairs.
Yes.
We did Beta Breakers. We eventually did the 49ers. We did Oakland Raiders for a period of time. So we went after just about everything. Wine tastings, you name it. We were after it, and gradually had to pull back because we were spread too thin. But that really helped get our name out there.
There's no doubt about it, because I can remember being part of a talent pool, and people are standing in line for, I want to say miles, but they were way back there,
Right.
just to talk to us.
That's right.
And that was, for me, that was kind of odd, because I'd never had that kind of experience.
Well, it also gave
in
us great
broadcasting.
demographic exposure.
Yes.
The format tends to be on the older side, but being at Beta Breakers, things like that,
Yeah.
exposed us to a lot of people.
Beta Breakers was fun.
Yeah.
I didn't like getting up at 4 a.m, but it was fun. About noon, when it was time for me to go home, I was happy, but I enjoyed Beta Breakers.
And another part of that story, you didn't ask me, but I'll tell you. We were in an unusual situation. We had a sister television station that had no interest in us at all. They just had no interest in radio. And there was such a great synergistic opportunity there. A very, very dear friend of mine who passed away recently, Art Kern, used to run Channel 5, Westinghouse KPIX. And he had a sister CBS affiliate, KCBS, who had no interest in working with him. So we formed this partnership, this cross-partnership with Channel 5. And we did the Beta Breakers together, and we did the 49ers. And it turned out to be a great, great partnership.
Talk about the sports angle, because you mentioned the 49ers, the Raiders, and did we not do the A's to have some A's games?
Never did the A's.
No A's. No A's. How did you connect with, like, the 49ers, for instance, because we did lots of great work with the Niners?
Well, it started with the Raiders. We couldn't get the 49ers right off the bat, and the Raiders were available to us, and we picked up the Raiders. Tough organization to work with, but we nevertheless carried them. And the idea of pro football on the weekends got us on listeners' dials that ordinarily we wouldn't get on. And first of all, it was an East Bay franchise predominantly, and there were football fans who some may not have been news fans or news talk fans. And but then when we had a chance to get the 49ers, this is a story in itself, we went after them hook, line, and sinker. And that story is in my memoirs. It's a fabulous story, how we finally got the 49ers. And that was our promotion budget once we got the 49ers.
That was a lot of money.
It was a lot of money. We never made $1 on it. But it was our promotion budget because 49ers had quite the following, and the Bartolos were very good to work with, and as a result, it helped us get on dials that we wouldn't normally have gotten on.
On the other side, the Raiders, East Bay, and not the best team to work with in terms of logistics and the kind of things that they did, but you had two iconic guys working on the air, Bill King and Scotty Sterling.
Yes.
They actually made that broadcast what it was.
Oh, Bill King was fabulous, yes. Absolutely fabulous. Now there's a negotiation that always took place in a restaurant. That was, you saw Bill. They couldn't put enough food on the table for him.
He wasn't a big guy.
He was a tiny little guy, yeah. But and he was just a terrific individual.
And amazing on the air.
Yes.
There's very little competition for
one of
a
the
guy
best.
like Bill King.
Absolutely,
for
one
sure.
of the best. Yeah.
And in the KGO realm, you had amazing sports guys too. Joe Starkey, Rich Walkoff, and who was before Joe Starkey? I don't remember, or maybe because I wasn't there then.
I don't remember.
But
I know. Greg.
it'll come to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just remember, and I know, Starkey's still hanging out with us, but he was like the best.
Right.
That was the other
Right.
element. And
Right.
Cal football, what was that like for KGO?
Well, Cal never had good seasons when we were with him, and but the reason we picked it up is because there were more Cal alumni. Cal had the biggest alumni of any major school in the country, and most of them lived in the Bay Area. A huge percentage of them lived in the Bay Area. So there's another group that ordinarily we couldn't get on our dial, but we did because of the alumni. Yeah, I remember Cal would occasionally blame us for having a bad season or a bad game. That's also in my memoirs. I'd go to a meeting with all the old Blues, and they'd say, "Well, the broadcast was lousy."
Joe Starkey's never been lousy. I don't see that. But I do see a lot of the, just going back and looking at the history of the station, how iconic it really was. The one thing, though, that really was important to you, I believe, was to hire the right people with the right synergy, because we didn't have a lot of sort of backstabbing, backbiting kind of thing that you hear in other occupations and in other stations. We had a very cohesive, family-like group. I was there for 25 years, and that's how I remember it. I don't remember anything, any big blow-ups. You maybe kept those hidden.
I did. There were a few.
I'm sure there were a few, but the family aspect. Talk about that.
Well, we did parties. I honored everyone's birthday all the time. Parties for any possible occasion. And KGO won a lot of awards, and every time we won an award, we'd have a big party for the staff, and that helped. And when I was a national rep for Metro Media, we repped one station in Philadelphia. It's called WIP, 610 on the dial, and that station had such an amazing personality, not only on the air but just within the confines of the studios. And I remember walking into that station, and it was just so vibrant and so alive. I said to myself, if I ever manage a radio station, that's what this one's going to be. And I tried to inject that into KGO. It's a lot easier to do with a music station than it is with a news talk station.
Sure.
But I try to inject that as well as I could into KGO. But there are a few behind the scenes situations which I try to keep as private as possible.
And you did a great job, Mickey.
Well, thank you.
I mean, we hear rumblings about things, but it never really affected us. And we were all rather, at least in the newsroom, I can speak to the newsroom, we were a really kind of cohesive group, and we had good managers except for one.
Yeah.
And who shall be nameless.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to get sued.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I don't know how to handle that one in my memoirs either.
Now tell me about these memoirs that you are allegedly writing, because you've been telling me that you've been writing these memoirs since we retired.
You're right. And when I left KGO, I said I'm going to write my memoirs, and I started out with a flurry, and then through the years I've added pieces here and there, but I keep promising myself I've got to finish them, and I will. And they're not anything that I ever intend to sell. It's just for people to have, my kids to have.
So you're just going to finish it, not sell it.
No, I don't want to sell it. But there's some fabulous stories in it.
I know there are.
Yeah.
I know there are fabulous stories, and I'm sure because of how the business is changing, there are people, even young people now who are in school, who would love to read about the good old days of real radio.
Yeah, hopefully.
So maybe way down the line, someone will publish them after most of the people are gone.
I don't know. But there was one story, if you have time for me to tell it.
We have as much time as you
okay.
need.
But it was one that got me in more bad publicity than anything. When I finally got the rights to the 49ers, I was determined that was going to be our property. And I had told the 49ers that, and they said, Mickey, you do whatever you want. You're paying for it. You do whatever you want. And I put Joe Starkey in as the announcer. And Bill Walsh called me, and he said, Mickey, you can't do that. You got to have Lon in there. Obviously, Lon had gotten to him. And Lon Simmons was a fixture in this market.
I remember.
Big time. Big time. And he did excellent baseball. I thought didn't do quite that well in football. And I acquiesced to him. And then next year I put Joe Starkey in, and Lon just went all over town saying, I mean, he took me to task for being alive. And it was very, very uncomfortable. And I remember I was going back to Michigan, and my mother was having open heart surgery, and it was on television, it was in the newspapers, other radio stations, this incident of me replacing the great Lon Simmons. And as I'm driving down the driveway, I just decided to look down at the newspaper, and I could see Lon Simmons says, and I said, I'm not even going to pick up the paper. I'm going back to Michigan. And he took care of me pretty well. And but a number of years later, he was on a airport bus, and Ed Baxter was on the bus. And he said to Ed, I did the wrong thing with Mickey.
Really? Really?
He used other words, but
yeah. That's interesting.
Well, I got several of those.
Well, that is interesting, because I heard some of those stories as well.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's not my experience.
That was tough.
That
was tough.
Now, we've talked a lot about KGO, but you had control of another iconic station, KSFO, that hot talk format. What was that like? Because it seemed out of your wheelhouse in terms of just the content.
It was. It was. Are you talking about when we went conservative with it? Yeah. I prevailed on Cap Cities. It's another story that's in the memoirs. I prevailed upon Cap Cities to buy a station to protect KGO, because we had an exclusive in the market. And it's hard to be exclusive in radio, because somebody would copy you and try to get part of your audience, naturally. So I prevailed upon Cap Cities to buy KSFO, because I knew it was available. So I went to the owner, who it was a pile of nothing at the time, and I said, I'd like to buy it. And he said, okay, here's the price. And he told me, and it was a reasonable price. So I went to a meeting, Cap Cities meeting, where Warren Buffett was there, incidentally, and I met him, and we talked several times. But the company said, okay, that's a good reason to buy it, which I thought was pretty generous of them. So we bought it, and I didn't know what the hell I was going to put on it.
I remember.
But, we had this, KSFO 560 was not a great facility, but classic call letters, of course. And so we bought it, and I tinkered around for just a few months, and a former program director called me, and he said, there's a station up here in Seattle where he was. He said, it's conservative radio. I said, conservative radio in the Bay Area? I don't know about that. He said, well, he said, Seattle's not that different from San Francisco. So I thought about it, and I surveyed the market, and I was surprised at something that to this day surprised me. That was there beyond the city limits of Berkeley and San Francisco. There are a lot of conservative people living in the greater Bay Area.
And more now than then.
Oh, yeah. So we put it on the air, and it went right to the top. In fact, it challenged KGO there for a brief period of time. I remember the company saying to me, let me get this straight, Mickey. You bought a station there and you're putting conservative radio in San Francisco? And I said, yep. And they said, okay, I hope it works. And it did.
Yeah.
And it did. But it was tough.
Yeah,
It was tough.
because I mean, did it? I mean, it was competition, but did it sort of tap into the money part of our business?
For a short time. For a short time. It wasn't a long-term success. Yeah, it was not a long-term success. But the limited signal didn't help the situation.
Yeah, and I remember when the station moved into our facility when we were at Front Street at the broadcast center, and most of the time we wouldn't walk past the station because we didn't like the content. That was kind of crazy.
We had some rough people.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah.
We really did.
They were. Yeah. There were things. Well, then they were tame compared to what's happening now. It's like a whole new world. But I digress. Now you left the business in 2010. You retired, or you just walked away, or?
I did just walk away. I just taken up with my second wife, and I said to her, "Do you mind if I retire?" And she said, "No, that's fine with me," and did, and that's when I said I'd write my memoirs. But along came, well, two things happened to me. One was I used to serve on the board of the Palace of Fine Arts, and it was not run very well. And so one day I was at a meeting, and I said, in fact, they only had a meeting when they needed help with the city, because I had a relationship with Willie Brown. It wasn't a good one, but it was a relationship. And so we need help. So I'd go to Willie Brown and we'd work out a deal. And so I got a call, "Mickey, we just elected you president." So I took over the Theater of Palace Fine Arts, which I'm still doing.
I know.
That's a pro bono thing, but it's exciting. It's come along nicely. And then a fellow had seen me, fellow who was always owned lots of radio stations, had seen me do a panel at the NAB. And he said, "Mickey, I know that you've always wanted to own your own radio station." And I said, "Yeah, that's true, but this time, I was out of the business." He said, "Would you like to go back in?" I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" And he says, "Well, I'm looking at a group of stations, and I'd love to have you be part of the group." So we bought them, and still have them.
Good.
And there's four little FM stations in Kankakee, Illinois.
Okay.
And can't do them like we did KGO, but the principles are the same.
That's good.
So that keeps me busy.
We need media that is principled now more than ever.
We do.
So even they're just small stations, it matters.
Yeah.
It matters.
Yeah.
For all the years that you were in this business, did you ever consider what your legacy might be? You're still in the business, actually. So I don't know that it's the right time to talk about legacy, but if you did, if you thought about it, what would that be, Mickey?
Well, we had an amazing staff. I think we were an important part of Bay Area radio, and Rosie, I love to win, and that did it for me. We won.
Yeah. And you pulled a lot of us in who had the same thoughts.
Yes.
We all wanted to win.
Yes.
We didn't. Now, I don't think anybody sat back and said, "Oh, we're not going to win this week." We were always, out there hustling. We had some people in the newsroom, the reporters, who were amazing people, and the producers who could just pull everything out of them.
Yep.
So we had one of the best news departments in the country. I'm sure.
And I'll tell you this one final story, Rosie. I got a call one day from this company, the last company who owned us, that's what got me to leave.
Nameless.
And he calls me one day with a leading talent on WABC in New York, rock and roll station at the time. And he says, well, tell him what you think. And he says, the talent says, "Oh, I like WCBS." I said, "Well, that's nice." Mm-hmm. And he said, "So why aren't we like WCBS?" And I said, "Well, very good reason. We have a station in the market that is just like WCBS, and we don't want to be the same. We want to be the alternative."
Yeah.
And silence, total silence. I think it lasted for a minute and a half. I said, "Anything else?" "No, goodbye." I thought that was one of the
I
most
wanna
foolish calls I've ever been part of.
Am I going to get a copy of this memoir?
Yes.
Okay. I have a couple of things that I wanted to go over with you. One is changes in radio and broadcasting since you left in 2010, and now you have the small stations. How are you dealing with the changes that are just afoot?
Well, the changes don't affect us. We have no debt, and the four major owners of broadcasting radio stations in America right now are all in bankruptcy. So our idea is we'll never be in debt. That's number one. Number two is we're live and we're local, and
Matters.
that's as long as I'm part of it, that's where we'll be.
That matters.
And to me, and we happen to be in a market with no local television and a very, very meager newspaper. So
It's
it's
got to be an interesting time.
a good opportunity.
Yeah. So do you get to Kankakee very often?
About 2 or 3 times a year.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
I think it'd be interesting to just go see Kankakee. I think probably one of the final questions I wanted to ask you, and this is when, I guess, the loss of the KGO call sign recently, and also KSFO, two iconic call signs in this market. Your thoughts on that?
Absolute foolishness.
Yeah.
Absolute foolishness. I mean, it shows you the kind of people who are buying radio stations or operating radio stations, I should say. To do anything like that is makes no sense.
Yeah, I can agree with you. Any final thoughts on our business? Well, final is,
Well,
for this interview.
we have more competition, like as do the television stations. We have more competition than we've ever had before, and if you're not specialized or unique in some way, it's a tough way to make a living, especially in the major markets. Small market radio, I think, is still doing all right, but there's a place for good operators. But of course, in a market this size, it's a much more difficult thing.
Yeah. Well, you're terrific as always, and thank you for
Thank you, Rosie.
sitting and chatting with us.
You're going to do an interview now with one of a very successful operators.
Yes.
Who did a specialty format as well as anyone has ever done it, and I think you'll enjoy meeting him.
Yes. That's Mr. Harvey Stone for
That's
the people who...
the Harvey Stone.
Yes, for the people who will follow up on this interview and want to check out that one coming up. Thank you, Mickey.
Thank you, Rosie.
All right.